to turn around diabetes and really have that impact. My product, again, is more made for somebody to not develop diabetes. Again, and it's not as sexy because it's prevention and, who cares about that? But once somebody actually has somebody, then they want to reverse, but it's way easier. So your listeners, I hope they hear this. It's way easier to prevent diabetes than to reverse it once you have it. But you can do it, but it takes a lot more effort.
Welcome to Your Infinite Health. Are you getting older?
Are you feeling it?
How would you like to do that in reverse?
We're your host,
Dr. Tripp
and Lene.
We've run an integrative medicine practice for 13 years.
Together, we have 60 years of combined experience helping clients.
We've helped tens of thousands achieve success in health and live longer, happier lives.
In this show, we'll cover peer-reviewed and evidence-based integrative approaches to creating the health you've always wanted.
We also share professional experience we see in the field every day.
So if you're ready to feel, look, and live your best life, you're in the right place.
Welcome to Your Infinite Health Podcast.
Hey, Tripp.
Hey, Lene.
What's up?
Not much.
I hear you have a really bad joke.
Right, I do. Actually,
I think the listeners...
Bad doctor joke.
I think okay. I think the listeners would love to hear your bad joke because I'm always the one giving them. So please share.
Okay, so there's this elderly man and woman. They're going to church. And the elderly woman has a problem with flatulence. And during the service, about halfway through the service, the elderly woman whispers to the elderly man, honey, I've just had silent flatulence. What should I do? And the elderly man turns and looks at her and he says, maybe you should turn up your hearing aid.
That's so funny. That's so funny. But why is that a doctor joke?
I don't know.
That's not a doctor. That's a church joke, if anything.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a church joke.
Yeah, I can live with that.
So bad. So we have a guest today.
Okay.
I'm really excited about it.
Okay.
I'm going to read about him, but I'm not going to tell you who he is until the very end.
Okay.
See if you can guess who our guest is. Okay. So our guest has taken a novel approach to the health and wellness industry with the establishment of SOS Nutrients, a Santa Barbara-based smoothie, and his interdisciplinary background featuring degrees in economics and psychology from the University of Colorado has allowed him to develop a comprehensive understanding to economy, politics, and healthcare. His diverse career encompasses significant roles such as the co-owner of Neighborhood Power, a solar development company that achieved $40 million in back orders in 2016. I hope they've gotten their stuff by now. And owner and co-founder of Allied Logistics, a Ventura-based aerospace manufacturing and exporting firm.
Wow.
Yeah, that was awarded the Small Business Exporter of the Year in 2003. And in addition to his entrepreneurial pursuits, he has demonstrated a commitment to philanthropy by co-founding the nonprofit organization Adopt a Pet in 1996. This initiative has since facilitated homes for over 2 million pets and increased its annual operating budget to over $2 million. I know, impressive, right? Yeah. His innovative approach to the health and wellness industry, exemplified by SOS Nutrients, showcases the potential for further advancements in the field driven by sustainable and wholesome product development. Dr. Tripp, welcome with me, Steven Abbey.
Well, thanks for having me.
Oh,
yeah.
Welcome.
So you were saying before we went live was that you were in New Orleans facilitating pet rescue during or shortly thereafter Katrina, right?
Yeah. So as we were talking about, so when they were doing the rescues and taking people out of there, they were forced to leave their pets behind. And so there were literally thousands upon thousands of dogs, cats, and others that were just wandering the streets, literally starving to death. And so the guy that I worked with and who actually, I'll say he founded Adopt a Pet, I just funded it at that time.
Okay.
So that's how I was facilitating that. But he set up a group of people to go there and help. And I was one of those people. And it was a very, you were talking about PTSD. I definitely have some from that time period, from what was going on at that time. Even though it's a beautiful city, but I didn't see it at its best moment. It was a very difficult time.
Yeah, I would say the city has made great efforts in redevelopment. But it's still like every city got its issues.
Yep.
So, well, that being said, so tell me, you've got kind of an eclectic entrepreneurial journey here. So, or there's solar powered things they go on the roof, the solar powered things. And then that's healthy for the planet. And so now you've gotten into healthy for the body. How did you get from solar power panels to smoothie development?
Well, actually, so the aerospace company that you read in that bio and the solar development company, those were financial companies. In other words, I was doing them because they were ways of potentially doing very well. But they were not my passion. And I got into this by 30 years ago. I had a very serious case of psoriasis. I had reactive hypoglycemia, which I'm sure you guys know a lot about because I saw what you look at diabetes, and that's a, pre-diabetic condition. And I had a chronic fatigue. I was just not doing well. And so I did a really deep dive into nutrition at that time. And I was taking classes. I started working with a naturopath, where I was just essentially his assistant. And then I started taking over some of the cases in any event. But after I solved my own stuff, I started looking into all these other things on heart disease, cancer, diabetes, osteoporosis, autoimmune diseases. And I was fascinated that there was all this information that is clearly showing ways that people can avoid these things, but it wasn't being translated into health. And I'm just sitting there blown away that wasn't happening. So I have been doing all these things to keep myself healthy for the last 30 some odd years. And then a few years ago, I think it was 6 years ago, a couple of friends got really sick, and myself and a team of people helped them in the last months of their lives end up going through the process of dying from preventable diseases. And I was just like, so what I wanted to do is create something that was all natural, whole foods, and very comprehensive to keep people from developing those sort of things. And after the last person, I was just like, okay, so that's it. I've got to get this out there because I didn't see that product on the market. So that's how I came into doing this. And this is a passion project. This is not one that I'm trying to make millions of dollars.
Great stuff.
So what is the difference between SOS Nutrients powder and because Whole Foods has a whole 2 aisles worth of stuff, and it may or may not actually be helping anybody. So what separates your SOS from all that?
Well, there are comprehensive products and there are whole food products. And never do those usually meet that I can find. So you're either talking about a comprehensive one, but they don't have a whole bunch of things from my perspective, and they're synthetic almost always.
Okay.
And if you're talking about a whole food product, there are many good ones on the market and they're very tailored, but they're not comprehensive. So I'll give you an example of the difference. And the main thing is I really tried to do something that was covering all of these different things. Like I have a whole mushroom blend, and I mean a full dose. Like if you went and bought a mushroom blend, usually the dose is about 2 grams. And so I have 2 full grams, which will give a full immune response. It's high beta glucan. It's organic. It's low starch because you want to have a low amount of the substrate that it's grown on. You want to, in fact, have almost none. And the problem with it is if you're not measuring for that, it can be ground up on the substrate, sorghum or oats or whatever it's grown on, right? So you want to have the active substance and not that. So I have a full dose of that. I have a full dose of greens, and they're almost all cruciferous for multiple reasons. I have a full dose of freeze-dried organic berries. I have a full probiotic in 10 billion CFUs of 3 bacillus strains. However, that's great for repopulating the gut. But the truth is people need to feed their gut. They need to keep their microbiome happy. And you need basically fiber and resistant starch and things like that. So I have a lot of the prebiotics there to keep people, keeping a healthy gut. I have botanicals like turmeric and black pepper in efficacious doses. So, AMLA. But then when you're looking at the RDA nutrients, and they're not just RDA nutrients, you have things like anthocyanins, which I'm sure you've heard of, which are super important for heart health, brain health, things like that, because it passes the blood-brain barrier. You have zeaxanthin, which is concentrated in the eye, along with lutein, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to really target really important nutrients to get them in there. But if you look at, say, the RDA nutrients, and just take the easy one. Like if you go on to Amazon right now, or if your listeners do, and you type in vitamin C at the top of Amazon, and you look down the first 100 items, they will all be synthetically based. I just did it.
How do you tell? Like, how can you tell?
So the way you'll see it is if it says ascorbic acid, calcium ascorbate, or liposomal vitamin C, if it's stating that or something like that, those are all synthetics. Have you ever gone to a manufacturing process of how ascorbic acid is manufactured? You ever seen
I have not.
No. So the way it's manufactured, it used to be all made in a lab in New Jersey, and it got switched over to China. 95% of the world's supply is made in China. And the way you make vitamin C in a lab, this is a patented process. They take high fructose corn syrup, they put it under incredible pressure, incredible heat. They do an acetone wash, and then they neutralize it with hydrochloric acid. And in the end, you have a molecule that is chemically identical to what you find in nature. However, it has no vitamin activity on its own, has to have the cofactors and bioflavonoids and all these other things, or it doesn't have any vitamin activity. And it doesn't work the same in the body, right? So if I have, there's going to be different studies showing different things, but I have a study, and, there are literally hundreds of them out there, but I have a study on my research section that shows the difference between, for looking at the progression of heart disease as measured by the carotid artery thickness, right? And as it gets thicker and thicker, that's not a good thing, right? And people with the highest supplemental dose of vitamin C were moving 3 times faster than people not taking any at all, whereas dietary vitamin C was shown to be protective, albeit not a huge effect, but it was showing to be protective as opposed to a net negative. And so all of these things, like the difference, so the reason why this is not being done is, one, there aren't that many companies offering whole foods. So the market isn't huge yet. So 2, I pay for a freeze-dried acerola cherry powder. I think it's just a little over 20 times what you'd cost for ascorbic acid. Also, you have a supply chain issue because there aren't many suppliers. So then it's much bulkier because I have to put in a lot more than just ascorbic acid, right? I put it in the whole product. And I'm using a freeze-dried because it retains most of the nutrients, freeze-dried acerola cherry, or amla, which is Indian gooseberry powder, for that vitamin C, plus a whole blend of berries and things like that. But it's far more expensive. There's a bigger supply chain risk. And then with other things, you have to deal with taste issues. Like I use, instead of potassium iodide for the iodine in the product, I use a blend of 3 organic kelps from Iceland, and which is, if that source goes away, I'm in a little bit of trouble. Plus, it has a taste issue. Plus, it's much bigger. Plus, it's 35 times more expensive. So all these companies are not going to do it. But look at the difference between a gentle way of taking iodine in a whole food form in a green leafy vegetable with a full spectrum of minerals. It's a different experience in how your body accepts it and how your body utilizes it. And if you believe in things that are not just everything you can touch and feel, but there's an energetic to everything. Think of the difference between how something is made in a lab and how something is made in nature, which is how we're built to accept it. We've never before, the last 100 years taken something that's an isolated nutrient and said that's supposed to get us health. And if you look at that, if you look at the studies on multivitamins and things like that, they don't work. So I have a study on my website where it was looking at hundreds of thousands of people years of taking a multivitamin, and it had no statistical difference in the benefit.
Wow.
Now, when I teased through the data, I think it did have a little bit of benefit. Some studies, it was a meta-analysis, right? So it was looking, for your listeners, that's looking at a study, looking at a whole bunch of other studies. But it was a huge study, and it showed no statistical significance. Again, maybe a little bit of benefit in my mind, but it wasn't statistically significant. But if those people had just eaten an apple, they would be in a better place.
Wow.
Except for maybe the glucose load.
Well,
Wow.
I mean, yeah, but if you look at the amount of nutrition in an apple and the amount, if you're looking at unless you're overdoing apples, and it's kind of, from my perspective, it's hard to do that. You're not spiking the blood sugar that much. I measure a lot of people with diabetes and things like that, and it does spike it. But that's a much deeper story. But I think from an overall perspective, if somebody has an apple a day, their C-reactive protein is going to go down, their oxidative stress will go down. I'm doing studies right now where I'm measuring that in people, not just specifically with apples, but with my product, with a full smoothie. And so, yeah.
So your product is like a powdered canister with a scoop, and like how often would somebody take that? Is it every day, replace a meal? How does that work?
Well, I recommend people take it 5 or 6 times a week. It's a whole food product. It's like food, right? And it's just added to more food in terms of a smoothie. And if somebody does have a blood sugar issue, they can change it a little bit. But what I recommend is, and I have healthy smoothies on my website. But if somebody makes a healthy smoothie, think about this: only 3% of Americans, according to a recent study, get enough green and leafy vegetables. So there's a full serving of greens, cruciferous in my product, right? But then I have them mix it with greens. Then I have them mix it with some berries, because berries are the most nutrient dense. And I already have a full dose of berries, but they're so good. I'm having people, I can only put so much into my product. Otherwise, it's going to be $500 a serving. But so if people do this, they put greens in, they put berries in, and then I put in a nut or seed butter, because you always want to have the fat soluble vitamins absorbable. And so it needs to have some fat source there for that. And nuts and seeds have been so healthy. There was a recent study done on heart disease risk and nuts and seeds. And they looked at people where they were having 5 servings a week or more compared to 1 serving or less. And it had over a 50% reduction in our number one killer, which was heart disease, right? But then they're like, well, maybe it was just because they were offsetting meat. So that's possible. So the authors did it with vegetarians. They had a bigger result. So for me, having nuts and seeds are super healthy to do. And so I have them in my product in the form of organic golden sprouted flax and organic sprouted chia seeds. But the truth is that's, I think, 7.5 grams, but I would personally even add more to it than that. So I tell people to put one in, and there's one called Nutso. I have no affiliation with them. It's a blend of organic nuts and seeds. I think it's 7 or 8 nuts and seeds, all organic. And so to me, that's a great way of getting a healthy fat in there, in addition to what I have in my product, so that it really covers that base as well.
So you said you're doing kind of like a clinical study with your clients?
Well, so what I'm doing is I did one guy he's kind of a local influencer here. He's the host of Animal Planet and Discovery, and he's also host Shark Week. And his name's Forrest Galante, and he's given me authorization to talk about what we've done together. And I pitched him that, hey, what I'd like to do is take your blood I'm going to be doing this with other people as well, but I'm going to take your blood and then, you'll take a smoothie for a few months and then we'll take your blood again and see what we're able to do. And I'm like, you're kind of, look like an Adonis. So I'm not sure how much this is going to make a difference. But, when we took his blood, it actually wasn't what I was expecting. His C-reactive protein, and for your listeners, that's a marker for inflammation, was 10.9 or 3.5 times a very high level, right? Not expected. His oxidized LDL was 81. His F2 isoprostane, which is a marker for lipid oxidation, was way too high, almost double what you should be. His 8-OHDG, which is a marker for DNA damage, was 2.5 times the red zone. So way too high, like way off the chart. I was not expecting that. And then we did a full spectrum of micronutrients from a lab called Vibrant America, where it looked at everything, vitamin A, B1, B2, and it looked at both the serum level and the white blood cell level. And he was off in several of those. So fast forward 6 weeks, his C-reactive protein, or his marker for inflammation, went from 10.9 to 1.6. So a fantastic result. His oxidized LDL went from 81 to 79. Not a great result. His A1C, actually, he started as a pre-diabetic. He started at 5.7. It dropped to 5.0. So you guys know what that means. That's not horrible. It's just inside the pre-diabetic. But it went to 5.0 in 6 weeks. So we just did another test. It was now at 5.5. So I don't think it's fantastic, but we're continuing on. And I've been working with other diabetics, and when done in a full program, they get very good. One was that's a whole longer story.
Well, so how old is
he's 34.
34?
Yeah.
So you were making a face.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the A1C. The A1C is a glycosylated hemoglobin, right? So that number actually evolves over a 4-month period. So that's an average.
I know it's not supposed to happen that fast. I know.
5.0,
usually over 3, but
5.0 would have been, if you think about it critically, he would have had been hypoglycemic for a significant period of time to achieve that in 6 weeks. So I think there may have been an error in that lab, but the 5.5 sounds quite reasonable.
Well, I'll tell you what I think it is. You're absolutely right. And I told him I didn't understand how that happened. But what I talked with the lab, and they said it depends on the amount of hydration you had at the moment. So that can change it as well.
Yeah, not that much.
Not from 5.7 to 5.0. I don't know. That's what they said.
Not possible. I mean, that's a hypoglycemic. You would have had to been hypoglycemic. The 5.5 is, however, quite reasonable, and that's still an excellent result over that period of time.
Why did you decide to test at 6 weeks?
Because, we weren't supposed to do it at 6 weeks. It was supposed to be 3 months, but he had a shoot in Australia and Africa that came up. And so he had to leave early, and I was like, ugh. So we ended up doing it. Well, we just took his test again, and that's what I was talking about, the 5.5. So now it's been 7 months out.
Okay.
And we had a 5.5. His A1C dropped to less than 0.2. And then his all of the micronutrients got into line. So he had 100% of that. He had but there were 2 things. His bun was out of whack. So that still is not. Yeah.
Well, nitrogen.
You got to talk to Tracy in Wisconsin. She doesn't know what some of these terms mean.
Okay. Yeah. So, basically, I had a doctor, because I am not a doctor, but I had a doctor who was having to prescribe these tests, and he looked at him and he's just like, this is like a totally new person going through this. So I'm right now running a study out of Utah. They're all Mormons, and they're going through it now, and we're collecting their results. So we're going to have a new set of results in the next month and a half or so, where also a friend of mine has a tree trimming service, and he has 70 guys that work for him. And he's saying, they're not very healthy. So we're structuring one where all of his people are going on this. So we're going to have really good, data to see how much we can make a difference over the course of 3 months.
Interesting. I'd be curious to see how that works as well.
It sounds like a phenomenal product.
And so that, I'm sorry, you said his name was Russell?
Oh, you mean Forrest?
Yeah, I guess. Forrest?
Forrest Delonte, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Was he doing one a day? Like, what was his regimen, and what else was he eating, and was he working out? Like, what were the other things that he was doing in addition to that?
Yeah, he's a dynamic individual. I didn't have him do anything else, but this is what he did. He works out 6 days a week, but he was doing that before. I mean, he's a phenom, and he's really devoted to staying in great health for the camera, I'm sure, but just for his own interest in health.
Sure.
All I had him do is do a smoothie, and so here's where, I'll say it's cheating, and I'm just going to be perfectly so. He's having a very good smoothie every day, and then you're adding my product in. So what I want to do is actually do a double blind where they're seeing how much of this is somebody doing a healthy smoothie and how much of this is my product, because my product is designed to come in and meet all the misses that are not in a healthy smoothie and in the American diet. So let me give you an example. In a typical healthy smoothie, they don't have mushrooms, right?
Right.
They're just not there. Typical healthy smoothie doesn't have turmeric. Typical.
I do want to qualify, because I think a lot of people are getting smoothies from some of these fast food smoothie queen places. I don't know if you have those where you are. Those things are loaded with sugar. They are not healthy, but they advertise as healthy. So can you, again, would this be the difference between whole food natural versus those places probably using synthetics? They're loading them with sugar. So maybe qualify what a healthy smoothie is, because I think there's some confusion about what is and what is not healthy.
So you nailed it on the head. A healthy smoothie in my mind is all whole foods. So it's kind of what I was saying before. Like when I make a healthy smoothie, I take a huge thing of greens and I put it in there. Usually they're all organic power greens, a blend of them. I don't just do spinach for the oxalates. I don't mind a little bit of spinach in there, but I don't just have that as the centerpiece because of that. But a good amount of greens, and then
like arugula, like what, or broccoli?
No, kale, baby kale is not is a cruciferous, and so we have these blends of spinach and kale and things like that. And to me, kale has, I think it's 1/300th the amount of oxalates as spinach. So spinach is 40% of the American's diet of oxalates. It's just a big source of it. And to me, as long as you're not overdoing it too much, it's not usually a problem for people. But if you're having spinach big amounts every day, that could become a problem. But I have a good amount of greens, dark green leafy vegetables in there. Then I have a bunch of berries. I usually put a part of an avocado. I put in the nut and seed butter that I talked about. And then I often flavor it in some way, shape, or form. And the way I flavor it would be like, say, cacao, which is a superfood in and of itself. And then if I was to have any sweetener, I would just cut up some dates and put them in it.
Okay.
And so to me, that's a really healthy way of having a very good blend of things with it all being whole foods. And then my product comes in. So that's not going to have almost any iodine to speak of, but my product has a blend of 3 organic kelps that I mentioned. So you have now the iodine in there. Oh, this doesn't have any vitamin K2, but I have a chickpea extract, which is from the bacteria that creates vitamin K2, which is crucial for heart health and bone health. So that's in there as well. And then, the mushrooms that I talked about, then, the probiotics that I talked about, et cetera, et cetera. There are all these things that come in there and takes a really healthy smoothie that is potentially already very good for you and makes it life-changing.
Yeah, I really like the thought about the iodine too. I mean, I find fully 2/3 of my practice is iodine deficient. And even though we live right on the Gulf, right, where the natural produce here should contain a reasonable amount of iodine, it's almost consistent that I'm finding iodine deficiency and needing to supplement that. It's so critically important, obviously, for the thyroid, but also for breast health, prostate health, all these things. I mean, really, and that's a neat component you got going on there. And it is. I love the content of what you're talking about because it's very comprehensive and covering a lot of areas that people don't usually even think about.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have known that iodine was, when I think of iodine, I think of a certain subsegment of the society is missing that, especially in the Great Lakes region, because they just have such low iodine salt.
Started iodizing the salt because of
exactly. That study is what. Yeah, that's like many people see that as like the birth of the Western medicine model for nutrition because they took one substance and changed the goiter level. So,
and another interesting bit of trivia you can add to that is that iodine was actually the first medicine that was given, and that was back in the early 1800s. So it was the first thing that was given as a pill or as a liquid oral medicine to resolve goiters.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No,
interesting stuff.
So you're saying in your patients a lot of iodine deficiency?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think the amount that I have in my product is enough? It's 170% of the RDA, or it's like 270 micrograms.
So when you think about iodine and the metabolism of iodine, it's really neat that you can actually give yourself large doses of iodine, and virtually all of the unused portion of that will be eliminated by the kidneys within the 24-hour period. So the higher the content there, the better, actually.
Well, the reason why I did it less is if you look at the health sheet by, I think it's the USDA, or I'm not sure who put it out, but they say the upper limit is 900 micrograms. So I'm way underneath that. Yeah. Now, I've seen people, and I've even taken iodoral, and that's like 11 milligrams. So that's like huge 70 times the RDA. So we're talking about huge doses. And there's some people that use 50 milligrams, as I'm sure you know. I think Dr. Brownstein uses 50 milligrams. The problem with that is with some people, it can overwhelm, from what I've seen, overwhelm the thyroid.
Well, and there is I'm sorry to interrupt. There is some information that actually say that, those really large doses can actually create an autoimmune response.
Like Hashimoto's.
How can you have...
Yeah, exactly.
How does that happen if your kidneys are taking out what you don't need?
Well, I mean, you do have it in there. I mean, it takes a little while for the kidneys to clear it out.
So he asked if his dosing was...
yeah, I think your dosing is great. And I think certainly the RDA is kind of the minimum trivial amount that your body needs to just maintain. And so, and if that's the case, and iodized salt was supposed to balance off that deficit, then obviously, at least in my region where it should be good, where iodine content should be good, it's not achieving that outcome. And also with cardiovascular health and the trend for hypertensives not to use salt, then our consumption of iodized salt is decreased too. So there may be a component of that that's causing the health. There are
two problems. Yeah, there are two problems. So one, iodized salt is not well absorbed. So that's one of the big problems. But second thing is, so the CDC published a study in 1998, and I just sent this to somebody else. And if you're interested, I can send it after this. And it showed in 1998 that the urinary excretion of iodine, which is the way that it's often measured, right, had dropped in half from 20 years earlier. And the reason they cited was because people weren't using as much iodinized salt. And that was in 1998. And I think it's even less now.
Mhm.
So I think that that's become a big issue. And you have all of these goitrogens for your listeners, goitrogen are things that block the absorption of iodine. And so there are things like fluoride, which we have fluoridated water.
Yeah, all the halogens.
All halogens. So bromide, which is used as a leavening agent in breads. And then you have chlorine. So all three of those are really blocking it. And even cruciferous vegetables, which are in my product, are a very gentle goitrogen. So that's one of the reasons why I even put a little bit more. But it's not enough to really block it a lot, but I wanted to overdo it a little bit. And cruciferous vegetables, as I'm sure you guys have heard, are so anti-cancerous. It's ridiculous. And so to not have those would be crazy. I would just rather have plenty of iodine in there.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, random question. Are you growing your own mushrooms?
No.
Okay.
I work with an American company. That's funny that you say that. No, but I work with an American company, and they're all organic. They grow everything here. They have an over 20% beta glucan level, and they have less than 5% starch. So as I was talking about earlier, you want to make sure it's a very low starch, because otherwise you can check, and some of them are up to 60% starch, which means they just ground up, and you're getting sorghum or oats or something like that as the substrate, as what you're paying for mushrooms.
Oh, interesting. My daughter's partner is growing mushrooms. He's got this weird setup, but I don't think he's putting it in
what's
smoothies.
What's he growing those mushrooms for, though?
That's what I said.
I wasn't going to say anything, but if you're bringing it up.
I don't think they're going in smoothies. But he's a big mushroom. Kava, kratom, all that, all those things. Side note.
Well, they're so healthy. I mean, the immune function is just the easy one, but there's just so many health benefits of smoothie. I mean, from mushrooms. So it was an easy choice. And I give presentations, and I don't know what I can say and not, but I'm going to say I'm not a doctor, so do your own research. But there was a study done on people that have 18 grams of mushrooms a day. And these are normal button mushrooms or portobello. Yeah. And so in any event, but people that had on average 18 grams a day, the authors came out at the end and said they had a 45% reduction in cancer.
Wow.
So let's say that's twice too high. Maybe it's only 22%. That's fantastic. I've helped people at the end of their life with cancer. If you can avoid cancer, that is a good thing. And there are many things, the cruciferous that I talked about. It's just, there was a study done on those, and people that have 3 to 4 servings a week had 30 to 40% reduction in cancers across the board. And to me, those are really low downsides. In other words, what is the real danger of having that in your diet? And for your listeners, cruciferous are like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, things like that. So these are ones with a substance called sulforaphane that gets generated once you eat it.
Man, I have just learned a lot.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Yeah.
Wonderful stuff. So, okay. So, where does somebody get SOS Nutrients?
So the best place to find out about it and to get it is the website. It's sosnutrients.com. So just SOS and then the word nutrients.com. And there's, the recipes on there. There are, there's a small research section that is going to get filled out. And and if you have any questions on it or anything, you can write me. I'll jump on the phone. I am passionate about this. I love working with people. So, so if anybody has any questions, they can just reach out to me.
So do you have a big vision for SOS? What's the goal? What's your goal? What's your goal here?
Well, so my goal is to work with people to really transform their health. And the way that I see it is you guys work with people with diabetes. That is going to be one of my products. It hasn't happened now. And it's going to be blood sugar support because you can't do anything nutritionally and say, especially as a non-doctor. But I would love to do a study. I've already worked with people that have diabetes. It is I won't say a simple disease to cure, and I won't even use the C word, but it can be modified drastically. I have a friend, Tamara. She had a 9.5 A1C. You guys know what that means. That's a raging diabetic. Her numbers, and I'll send you after this, I'll send you her 24-hour blood glucose monitor. It was too low. This was after 2 months of doing a full cork press. And I'll tell you, it's because she did intermittent fasting. I didn't ask her to do this part, but she did 2 smoothies, one for breakfast and one for lunch. Then she did what I would say is not on the diet dinner. Just that was like, I have to have something for myself. It was way off the beaten track for that. But
you're talking like pasta or pizza, or what are you talking for dinner?
She was having like a hamburger and things like that. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You just had 2 smoothies, which I didn't ask her to do that.
So the 2 smoothies negated the bad impact of the hamburger and French fries and milkshake, right? Like,
yeah. Well, it wasn't just that. It was the intermittent fasting is healthy that way, and you have to have that starting early and ending early. You don't want to end it late because of the circadian rhythm. But at least from my perspective and the research I've done. And then she did a whole series of supplements that are not in my product because my product is not designed to undo somebody's blood sugar. It's designed to prevent people from going into a diabetic state and to keep them from going there. But the truth is for her, I had her doing a whole bunch of things that are either in my product, but they're not in efficacious doses for somebody that has diabetes, or they're not in my product, such as berberine. I don't know if you guys have worked with berberine, but in a study comparing it to metformin, it was identical in terms of the outcome. So berberine it's a natural substance, and to me, it's a good one. But then alma, which is in my product, but I had her taking a higher amount, black cumin seed, et cetera, et cetera. So I had her doing a whole bunch of other things. So again, that's where I want to take this in the future, is working with people and doctors like yourself, and to take this out and really work with people to undo it and show that they have another way of going that can really help them.
Well, yeah, Steve, the effectiveness, its effectiveness and the figures you talked about before, its effectiveness with the inflammation and reducing the inflammation, and the other thing is your impact that you're having on the microbiome with the pre and probiotic content of it are also critical in diabetics. There are some studies out there also that tell us that just changing the microbiome, which also will change the craving for the carbohydrates and those things, will actually change the A1C and get that down there too. So you've got a lot of components in there in the SOS that actually are really favorable for that diabetic population.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's to turn around, as I'm sure you guys are aware, to turn around diabetes and really have that impact. My product, again, is more made for somebody to not develop diabetes. Again, and it's not as sexy because it's prevention, and who cares about that? But once somebody actually has somebody, then they want to reverse it. But it's way easier. So your listeners, I hope they hear this. It's way easier to prevent diabetes than to reverse it once you have it. But you can do it, and but it takes a lot more effort.
Yeah. And I think that's key, is the patient has to sign up. They have to do the do. They have to be willing. On that thought process, you were saying that your friend, was doing smoothies and then had to have hamburgers she had to do something for her. But I would suggest that the smoothies were actually what she was doing for her, and that the latter was sabotaging and not actually serving what the goal was there. So
that's the law of thinking.
It's the law of thinking. Yeah.
Well, it's a hard thing for people to make the really substantial changes and to then incorporate them into their lifestyle for a long period of time. Because if somebody changes and lowers their blood sugar for 3 months, that's great. But what you're wanting to do is create a lifestyle so that sustains out.
Right.
Otherwise, you're great to do that for 3 months, but you're really going back. And then, she was already developing, neuropathy, and she was starting to have some of the long-term consequences. And blindness is one of them. Like if you're starting to have neuropathy, that's not a long ways behind. And then you can start losing toes, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Compliance is always an issue.
Yes.
Well, you just have to, 3 questions we ask are, what do you want? Why do you want it? And what are you willing to give or give up to receive it? It's really easy when you're trying to do a behavioral modification to get distracted. Oh, this party's here. Mardi Gras is coming up over here. Got to go celebrate St. Patrick's Day over here, And so all these distractions can hit you and knock you off your goal. You just have to keep reminding yourself why you're making the changes that you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody has their own threshold for what they're willing to do. But I know you guys have seen it 1,000 times when you're working with people. What are they willing to do? Do they stick to what you even tell them? I mean, what percentage? I don't know this, but what percentage actually are able to do it? But the biggest thing, they at least have to be given the information. So that is where you guys can really help facilitate a change. And then if they choose to step into it, they can help make that change.
Absolutely. Well, this has been really good. I've learned so much. I know Tripp's ready to get your product. He's all about it. He's like, oh yeah. So we'll go to your what was the website again?
SOS Nutrients.com, and I'll send you guys a discount code for your listeners after this if they're interested.
Ooh,
awesome
listeners! Discount code. Whoop whoop. Love that. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time. Steven, thank you so much for sharing your information. Looking forward to seeing, the results that you're getting and continuing to grow and
great success,
whatnot. And listeners, until next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for subscribing to Your Infinite Health. I'm Dr. Tripp.
And I'm Lene. Until next time, feel it, look it, and live it.